meeting place and home of the Blackfoot and the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Siksika, the Piikani, the Blood Tribe, the Tsuut'ina, and the Stoney Nakoda First Nations and the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 territory. The city of Calgary is also home to many urban Indigenous peoples with rich histories and cultures. This region is home to the people of many cultures, Inuit, Métis, and non-status Indigenous peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremony, and cultures of these people whose presence and culture enrich our communities. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of our past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in the partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. I would like to invite the Honourable Jason Kenney, Premier of Alberta, to kick off today's announcement.
Thanks very much, Doctor. To everybody here at Foothills, for welcoming myself, as well as Ministers Copping and Panda, and our host at Alberta Health Services, Dr. François Berger, Chief Medical Officer and Vice President of Quality, Dr. Mark Anselmo, who we just heard from, Medical Director of Calgary Zone for AHS, and Dr. Kevin Hildebrandt, the Head of the Department of Surgery in the zone. Thanks as well to the physicians, nurses, and staff working here at Foothills today. The last couple of years have been tough on all of us, but that's especially been true for the women and men on the front lines of Alberta's healthcare system. You've done an amazing job providing Albertans with critical care that they need through COVID and through really tough circumstances. You've dedicated your lives to protect the lives of others and the lives of our families and friends. And Alberta's government is making sure that both you and Alberta's healthcare system have the best tools in the world to provide the best care in the world. And because Alberta's government made the tough decisions to get our finances under control, we're now able to invest more in our health system and in its capacity. Yesterday, we tabled Budget 2022, Alberta's first balanced budget plan in 14 years. And if we land it as a balanced budget, it'll be actually only the second surplus in 14 years. It means we've achieved our goal to bring spending in line with the other big provinces and are no longer an outlier. We were for a long time the least efficient province. That's no longer the case. And that prudent management has allowed Alberta through Budget 2022 to invest a record amount of tax dollars in healthcare. We know we need to support a strong and resilient system that can meet the needs of Alberta families and kids, our neighbours and communities, and folks right across the province, both now and as we move out of and recover from COVID-19. $22 billion has been invested in Alberta's health operating budget. That's the highest amount in our province's history. Cataract removal wait lists are down from 41%, and that's just one example that I'll speak more about in a moment. We are making important progress and investments in continuing care and home care so that those in need can spend as much time as possible with loved ones. And so there's always life-affirming options, especially around palliative care. We're making historic investments in mental health and addiction support with a full continuum of care that embraces the hope and promise of lifetime recovery. And we're ensuring that Albertans will always have access to emergency medical services when the need arises. So Budget 2022's capital plan includes $2.2 billion for new and ongoing health projects and programs. That is a huge investment by Alberta taxpayers, and it's part of Alberta's recovery plan. A bold plan to build Alberta for the future and create needed jobs today. We're building healthcare infrastructure in communities across the province, and I want to talk a bit about some of those projects right now. As mentioned, we're supporting a $1.8 billion redevelopment project at the Red Deer Regional Hospital, with $193 million of that spent over the next 3 years to add 200 new beds, 3 new operating rooms, and a cardiac cath lab. This is long overdue, and it's something that Central Alberta has needed for many years. But because of Budget 2022, we're finally able to get this done. We're investing $46 million over 3 years towards the $79 million Lacrete Maternity and Community Health Centre. That's way up north, a rapidly growing community that is underserved in terms of healthcare. And we're building a birthing center and midwifery-led program up there so that moms with low-risk pregnancies can give birth closer to home. We're completing the Calgary Cancer Center, which I toured recently with Minister Panda, with a guaranteed addition of $332 million in approved funding over the next 2 years. And I believe, Prasad, that's part of a $1.4 billion project. And I've been lucky enough to tour that site. As I said, it really is a world-class cancer center, and it will bring to Calgarians, it will help to change the lives of Calgarians in positive ways and for people across our province. We're expanding mental health treatment spaces at the Peter Lougheed Centre, and we are beginning construction at the Neurosciences Intensive Care Unit at the University of Alberta's Hospital's Brain Centre. There's $36 million more for recovery communities. That's for long-term addiction and treatment and recovery. And $204 million over 3 years to support continuing care facilities and add more spaces. So that's pretty fantastic news already. But we also know that we have to confront some of the challenges that remain in our healthcare system. One of our top priorities on this front has been to drive down wait times for the surgeries that people need. New hips and knees for people who need to get back on their feet. Cataract surgeries to help people see clearly. Cancer surgeries to help with diagnosis and treatment, and most importantly, to provide hope when folks need it. Without a doubt, the COVID-19 created huge challenges for us when it comes to wait times. The pandemic hit us just as we looked to roll out the Alberta Surgical Initiative to get Albertans the surgeries they need with much shorter wait times. Instead, Alberta Health Services has had to postpone surgeries to save beds, spaces, and resources in intensive care units and in hospitals to care for those sick from COVID-19. These were tough choices, and I'm sorry for all the patients and families who have had their care, their surgeries delayed. But that promise of delivering those services has not changed. We aren't backing down, and we are going to deliver on our commitment to make sure that Albertans who need surgery don't wait on lists as things get worse for them. So the strategy is already paying off. In 2018-19, the median wait for cataract procedures was 17 weeks. Already in the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, the median wait for cataract removal is 10 weeks. That's a 41% decrease, thanks largely to the Alberta Surgical Initiative. And that's just one good, small example of the impact this will have as we roll it out for other kinds of surgical procedures in the next year. But we know we need to catch up on some of the COVID delays. So Budget 2022's COVID contingency fund of $750 million will help us to eliminate the surgical backlog related to the pandemic over the coming year and get us back on track. We're also forging ahead on capital projects to strengthen Alberta's entire surgical system. And after all that great news, I can finally talk about what brings me here today to the Foothills. Right here on the 5th floor of the McCaig Tower at Foothills Hospital, Alberta's investing a total of $63.5 million to add 11 new operating rooms. Foothills already has the highest number of operating rooms in the Calgary zone as a level 1 trauma center. That's 32 operating rooms that are already in use and busy. And we're making it even bigger and better to improve access to much needed care. These new operating rooms will be able to provide up to 7,000 more surgeries each year, including more cancer, spine, cardiac, and other kinds of surgery that people need in Calgary and the region. This is a big project that'll go a long way towards our promise to provide every Albertan the surgery that they need within the times that are recommended by medical experts. Budget 2022 commits $133 million over 3 years for projects like this across the province, adding new or expanding existing operating rooms in hospitals in Calgary, Edmonton, Edson, Grand Prairie, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and Rocky Mountain House. We're building a stronger, better health system that will serve Albertans today, tomorrow, and for generations to come. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to Minister Copping to provide a few more details on today's exciting announcement.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Premier, for the ongoing commitment you've shown to build a stronger healthcare system for our families, friends, and neighbours. I am so pleased to be in Calgary Varsity, the constituency that I am honoured to represent. It's great to be here to celebrate this important project that will expand access to care for people from Calgary, across the province, and beyond. Because Foothills is a resource not just for Calgary, but for Alberta and for Western Canada. I want to thank Dr. Anselmo, Dr. Belanger, and Dr. Hildebrand from AHS for welcoming us into a part of the Foothills Hospital that isn't yet open to the public. It is remarkable to be in this space and envision the walls being framed and the equipment being installed in 11 new operating rooms. Foothills Hospital is close to my heart. I live a few blocks away, and I've had family members treated here with care and compassion. And I want to just take a moment to thank all the staff that work here, from the doctors to the nurses to the orderlies to those in the cafeteria for the tremendous job that they do in caring for Albertans and Calgarians. We have a wonderful health system in this province. I'm grateful for it, and I'm honored to support it as the Minister of Health. But the reality is, as mentioned by the Premier, that people wait too long for some care, especially for scheduled surgery. So we campaigned on reducing wait times in 2019, and in December 2019, we rolled out the Alberta Surgical Initiative. Our health system is founded on a simple promise, that the care you need will be there when you need it. The ASI is our commitment to Albertans to renew our publicly funded health system by making that promise real, to give every patient their scheduled surgery within a clinically appropriate time. And we stand by that promise. In spite of all the disruption caused by the pandemic, it's where we need to go, and we will get there. In the meantime, though, COVID has taken a toll on all of us and strained our health system and the people who work in it. I am deeply sorry to all the families who have lost loved ones and to all the patients who've had a surgery or a procedure postponed. But we're a resilient province, and we have an incredibly strong and resilient system, thanks to the people who work in it. Together, we are going to recover from the latest wave of COVID-19, and we're going to do more than just recover. We're going to build an even stronger health system with better access to surgery and other care than we had before. The Alberta Surgical Initiative is our commitment to do that and a plan to do it. And Budget 2022 provides the resources to make this happen. But the most important resource of all is the doctors and nurses and all other healthcare professionals in hospitals like Foothills and across the entire healthcare system. They're the strength of our system, and they're the people who will deliver on the promise of the Surgical Initiative, because it's their commitment to every patient that they care for every day, the care you need when you need it. Delivering every scheduled surgery on time is an ambitious goal. But it doesn't seem like a stretch when you consider how well the system is performing even after 2 years of a global pandemic. Right now, today, with the Omicron wave of admitted patients just starting to pass, AHS is doing 95% of normal surgery volume. The waiting list is higher than it was before the Delta wave last fall, but only about 10,000 people higher in a system with normal capacity of nearly 300,000 surgeries a year. And the wait list hasn't increased in more than 2 months, because right through the Omicron wave, we've held surgery above 90% of normal volume. We're delivering cancer care at the same levels before the pandemic. Access to continuing care is actually better, and some wait times, like cataracts, as mentioned by the Premier, MRI and CT scans, are shorter than they were a year ago, or even shorter than before COVID. We can build on that, and we're going to build on that. We're going to ramp up to above 100% of normal surgery volume as soon as possible and start to work the wait list down. And we're going to add capacity here at Foothills and across the province to keep the volume up for as long as we need to get to the goal, the best access to scheduled surgery that we've ever had, in fact, the best that any province has ever had. The pandemic has had an impact on the timing of this plan. It's affected our planning in every area of the system, from surgery to continuing care. The wait list is longer today than when we announced the ASI back in 2019, and the pandemic is disrupting demand for surgery and other care as well as supply. Referrals for surgery are down, but they'll come back up as soon as we get back to normal. We don't know exactly how fast supply and demand will recover, and of course, we don't know what further impacts we may see from the pandemic. So it's hard to put a date on when we'll reach the goal for the ASI, but we will work at it until we get there. We've been laying the foundations over the past 2 years, and the approach is already starting to deliver results. Now with the resources in Budget 2022, we're going to push the surgery plan into high gear. And this project here at Foothills is a centerpiece of that plan. As mentioned by the Premier, we're adding 11 operating rooms to the 32 that are currently available here, an increase of more than 1/3, plus 17 recovery spaces. So the overall effect will be an increase of up to 1/3 in the total volume of surgery done here, an additional 7,000 surgeries performed here each year over the normal level of 21,000 before the pandemic. That will include more cancer, spine and cardiac surgeries, where the need is the greatest. This hospital and the 300 dedicated surgeons who work here also do transplants and orthopedics, and they do the most of the cancer surgeries in Calgary. Those cancer surgeries include a huge range of procedures: colorectal, liver and pancreas, breast melanoma, gynecology, orthopedics, plastics and reconstruction, head and neck, thoracic, and neurosurgery. And I look forward to further advances in cancer care when we open the new Calgary Cancer Centre in 2023, and as Minister Panda has said, it will be on time and on budget. The new ORs will include specialized features. 2 of them will support minimally invasive surgery, including procedures guided by radiology in real time. Another 1 or 2 new OR suites will support additional air exchange for surgeries that require implants, such as hip or knee replacements. And if you've been in an OR for one of these procedures, you'll get why this would be a big plus. They involve some pretty heavy construction, and that means smoke and chemical smells that can be overwhelming. And at least one of the new ORs will be an airborne isolation suite with an anteroom to support extra infection prevention requirements for patients with TB or COVID, for example. These upgrades will allow surgeons here at the Foothills to focus on the most complex surgeries. So that means more lower-risk surgeries can be moved off this site to chartered surgical facilities in Calgary, as well as in the hospitals in Canmore and High River. This is a $63.5 million project, and it's just part of the work that's going into the surgery plan. 2 additional operating rooms have already opened in the new Grand Prairie Regional Hospital. We also opened a 2nd procedure room in the Edson Hospital. And planning continues on surgery construction projects in Edmonton, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, and Rocky Mountain House. We promised Albertans a stronger, publicly funded health system, and we are building that system. A health system with the capacity to do all the surgeries Albertans need when they need them, not just this year, but 5 years from now and 10 years from now. Now I'd like to welcome my colleague, the Infrastructure Minister, on time, on budget, Prasad Panda, to the podium to say a few words about how projects like this are part of Alberta's recovery plan. Thank you.
You got a high standard you got to live up to there, Prasad. I know. I'll get rid of that for you. Good job, Jake. You went over there.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Minister Copping. I'm already feeling the pressure. So, but good thing is, I'm in a Foothills hospital accompanied by 3 good doctors here. So if something happens because of the pressure, I'm in safe hands. So Budget 2022 is moving Alberta forward by strengthening our healthcare system and getting more Albertans working. Part of improving access to healthcare will take place right here in Foothills Medical Center, where new operating rooms will be constructed as part of the surgical initiative. As Minister of Infrastructure, I promise to you that I'll keep a close eye on this project and all of our infrastructure projects, because Premier is watching me, so I had to be on time, on budget, to make sure that all these projects continue to move forward as planned. And in addition to the today's announcement, Premier and Minister Copping explained to you, there are so many other projects happening right here in Calgary Foothills. Premier mentioned about Calgary Cancer Center, which is almost ready, and then there is cogen facility we are building in Foothills, and also there is cyclotron project, and also there is neonatal ICU. Actually, Premier signed me up to help Calgary Health Foundation, so I think I'm on track to raise that 75,000 for them.
Another mustache?
Yeah, no, without mustache. And all these projects happen to be in the riding of Calgary Varsity, so I have no conflict of interest, but you can ask Minister of Health. They all happen to be in his riding. All these projects are part of our recovery plan. Alberta is investing more than $20 billion in the next 3 years on vital infrastructure projects, including health, education, and public infrastructure. And most of them are putting thousands of people in to work, even in smaller communities. And that $20.5 billion taxpayers are investing will actually help grow our economy as well and create much-needed jobs. And infrastructure projects are a critical part of our plan, which is working actually. And every taxpayer dollar spent on infrastructure is designed to ensure that you, your family, your businesses, your community will benefit from some economic and social impacts. And you could feel that, when you drive around in communities, the cafeterias are busy, and all the gas stations, all these workers and contractors and suppliers, they stop by to fill gas, and they're reinvesting those dollars in the communities, keeping your friends and neighbors busy, working all the time during the pandemic. So that's I should give credit to my colleagues, government caucus colleagues and cabinet colleagues and Premier for letting us continue the construction during pandemic safely, and thanks to the folks at Alberta Infrastructure and also all the contractors and skilled trade people for the last year for their due diligence in maintaining safe work practices. Because of that, all the projects, in spite of supply chain disruptions and COVID disruptions, all of them are tracking on time so far and on budget as well. With that, I want to share this good news with you over the next few weeks, because our capital plan is investing in new school builds in Calgary and also many transportation projects and other vital infrastructure projects. So you will hear a lot from us in the next few weeks. And we are also investing in vital capital maintenance and renewal projects to extend and refurbish the life of existing government-owned facilities. That will also create lots of jobs in local communities. Thank you. With that, I'll ask the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Francois, to come and give his remarks.
Thank you, Minister Panda, and thank you, Premier Kenney and Mr. Copping, for joining us in this exciting announcement today. It's my pleasure to be here today on behalf of Alberta Health Services to talk about the work we're doing in partnership with Alberta Health to reduce wait times for surgical procedures in our province. This announcement is most welcome news, not only for Calgarians, but for the thousands of people throughout the province who rely on the specialized services Foothills Medical Centre provides. We appreciate many patients and families have been concerned about their surgical wait times during the pandemic. The uncertainty of not knowing whether a procedure will happen as scheduled is a heavy burden for patients and families to carry. I want to thank Albertans for their patience and their understandings while we move quickly to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. And I want to assure you that as pressure eases on the healthcare system, we remain dedicated to performing surgeries within clinically appropriate targets. We continue to work through the surgical postponements from previous waves, and we are well on our way to recovering to the pre-pandemic surgical activity level. In fact, I'm pleased to report that we are currently delivering approximately 95% of average weekly surgical volumes in prior years. Currently, our total surgical wait list is stable and currently sits at approximately 76,800 this week. This is compared to approximately 79,500 at the beginning of January. And while it's impressive, it is improving and moving in the right direction. At this time, surgeries are postponed only on a case-by-case basis, site-by-site, in response to inpatient bed capacity needs and staff availability. We have not needed across-the-board surgery reductions as seen in some of the other waves. Overall, volumes of cases postponed are very small and localized to individual sites. Urgent and emergency surgeries, including cancer and pediatric surgeries, continue to be prioritized and are proceeding effectively. The addition of a new operating room at the Foothills Medical Center will have a significant impact on reducing surgical wait times in the Calgary zone, allowing the hospital to add approximately 7,000 more procedures annually. We are extremely grateful for the support from the government and very grateful for the patience of all Albertans who had their surgeries delays as we moved to respond to the pandemic. Working in partnership with Alberta Health, we are moving towards making sure patients and families will receive the surgery they need when they need it, and we remain focused on delivering those surgeries within the clinical appropriate targets. I would like to offer my special thanks to all the teams of Alberta Health Services, the physicians, the nurses, the surgeons, the OR staff, and all those folks that support our operating rooms that are working together to make this happen. We value your expertise, your dedication to Albertans, even in trial times. To wrap up the speaking portion of today's event, I would like to invite Dr. Kevin Hildebrand, the head of our Department of Surgery in the Calgary zones, to share remarks on behalf of the surgical teams. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Belanger. On behalf of the physicians and staff of the Calgary Zone's Department of Surgery, it's an honor to join everyone for this significant announcement. The Department of Surgery is a collaboration between Alberta Health Services and the University of Calgary. It's one of the largest surgical departments in North America with over 400 surgeons, many of whom practice here in the Calgary Zone and at the Foothills Medical Center. As Dr. Belanger pointed out, the pandemic has put a tremendous strain on our system, and particularly our ability to perform surgeries within targeted timeframes. Despite this, our surgical teams have done everything they can to ensure that care that is needed is received. This is reflected in our remarkable achievement of performing most of the postponed surgeries from earlier waves and working harder every day to return to pre-pandemic service levels. I'm extremely proud of our Calgary surgical teams and the many staff who support them for rising to the unprecedented challenges of the pandemic has presented. Your unwavering dedication is greatly appreciated, and your ability to innovate speaks to the high quality of Alberta's healthcare system. Today's announcement will further solidify the Foothills Medical Center and the Department of Surgery as national leaders in surgical excellence. Together with the completion of the Calgary Cancer Center and its dedicated surgical suites, the expansion of the surgical capacity at Foothills not only benefits Albertans, it also serves as a powerful tool to attract and retain the brightest and the best talent. These additional operating rooms will also go a long way in advancing training opportunities for residents and fellows through the University of Calgary's Cumming School of Medicine. It's inspiring to know that thanks to the shared commitment of everyone here today, this space will be transformed into just, in a few short years, into 11 world-class surgical suites. Looking forward to that. That's a 34% increase in the hospital's current OR. This is an exciting time for the department's 13 sections who teach and provide care in the Calgary zone, and we look forward to the future with renewed optimism. On behalf of the department, I'd like to offer our gratitude to the Government of Alberta for this important investment and to the AHS leadership for your ongoing advocacy. Our surgeon group is excited over this and will enhance our ability to serve the citizens of Alberta. Thank you.
Thanks, Doctor.
Thank you, Premier, Ministers, Doctors. We'll now move to the media Q&A. We've got some reporters on the phone here, so please direct who your question is to, and we'll get started. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Thank you. The first caller is Brittany Gervais, Calgary Herald. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. This is for the Premier.
Go ahead.
So the province announced details for a natural gas rebate with the budget yesterday, but we know many Albertans are struggling with high electricity costs as well. So I'm just wondering, will the government consider adding an electricity rebate if prices continue to soar?
Well, we know the price of electricity is way too high, and everybody's feeling that, particularly after the super cold snap in December, January, which had an impact on prices. So, look, we'll keep an open mind. There is $250 million in the budget set aside as a contingency to address issues about utility costs for consumers. At the end of the day, if we have the taxpayer pay those costs, it's a shell game. It moves the cost from the consumer ratepayer to the taxpayer. The same person ends up paying at the end of the day. The deeper problem is a whole bunch of mistakes that were made by previous governments that have given us these ridiculously high electricity prices. Previous government added about $4 or $5 billion in transmission costs that get passed on to consumers. Their carbon tax, and now Justin Trudeau's carbon tax, well, they want to triple that because they actually think that high electricity prices is a good thing. The NDP bungled their buyout of coal producers and ended up costing electricity consumers another $1.3 billion at minimum with the power purchasing agreement fiasco. And on top of that, their rush to shut down our most reliable and lowest cost form of power production in the coal generation plants has also massively increased prices. So you put all those things together, and it's the bad policy decisions of previous governments that have created these structural costs that are now getting passed on to each and every one of us. I wish we could go back in time and undo those irresponsible decisions. Unfortunately, we can't. So either now it's the ratepayer bears those costs or the taxpayer does. The good news is we're moving forward with the plan to reduce these costs in the long run. For example, we've had almost no spending on new transmission infrastructure since this government took office 2.5 years ago. As the economy grows, there will be more consumers, industrial and residential consumers, across whom we can share those distribution costs, so things will come down. But at the end of the day, the biggest cost driver here is going to be taxes, the carbon tax, the Trudeau carbon tax supported by Rachel Notley's NDP. We simply, as Canadians, need to stop them from tripling that tax, because if you think electricity prices are high now, hold on to your wallets, because they want to triple the single biggest cost driver on electricity prices, and there's no amount of action the government of Alberta could do to shelter people from that.
Brittany, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So we did have a few reporters point out already that according to the government's projections, the natural gas rebate is unlikely to actually come into effect because the trigger price was set so high. So I'm wondering, why isn't the province doing more to help Albertans, specifically with the rising cost of utilities? not only with gas, but electricity as well?
The trigger price was based on a similar program that was adopted back in 2003 when Albertans were coping with much higher gas prices back in the day. In fact, ours is an inflation-adjusted version of that 2003 trigger price adopted by the then Klein government. It's actually lower than an inflation-adjusted value on that. So, as Minister Toews has said, we will keep a close eye on this, and if we see higher gas prices before next October, we are prepared to act more quickly. At the end of the day, the prices are always higher in the winter. They should start to come down as the weather improves. And I think this underscores again why we need to get rid of these punishing carbon taxes. That is adding to as well the price of gas and heating people's homes. And let's be absolutely honest about this. The NDP and the federal Liberals like high gas prices. They love high electricity prices. They love high gasoline prices because they want people to consume less energy. They want them to drive less, turn down the temperature at home, and not turn on electricity so much. That's why they've embraced these ever-increasing carbon taxes. If we want to stop the continued inflation on things like gas, gasoline, home heating, electricity, we've got to stop these carbon taxes.
Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Thank you. Chris Varco, Calgary Herald.
Hi, this was also a question for the Premier. Premier, this is about CCUS. Your budget has a line item in there for $149 million in unallocated funding for this year, and I think it's $305 million over 4 years out of the tier fund for future CCUS projects. Can you explain, is this money intended to be some sort of matching fund with the federal tax credit, or is it leveraging federal money? Exactly what is that money intended for, and how will it work?
Well, it's neither one of those things, Chris. It is just part of our long-term strategy as a province, which started 15 years ago, to invest in carbon capture and storage. As you know, Alberta's been really a world leader on that, and the Tier Fund is our current way of investing in CCUS technology. We very much hope to see the feds keep their commitment to an investment tax credit to massively expand CCUS in their upcoming budget, and we've been in very close discussions with Minister Freeland and other federal ministers, senior officials in Ottawa, as well as the industry and the Oil Sands Pathways Group in that respect. And we are hopeful that they will come forward with a meaningful contribution. To date, the federal government hasn't done very much. And so those additional tier investments are part of our, as I say, our regular strategy, our 15-year strategy as a province to invest in carbon capture and storage. I would point out, Chris, that if an investment tax credit does trigger billions, potentially up to $30 billion of investment in new Alberta CCUS projects, those would and if the large emitters invest significant amounts of capital in those projects, that would reduce their effective royalty payments to the government of Alberta. So Alberta will and is prepared to make a very substantial implicit contribution to an expansion of CCUS infrastructure, again because the capital investment there would be offset by a reduction in royalty payments to the province of Alberta. And I would also point out that those companies who are looking at the Pathways oil sands producers who are promoting this CCUS investment tax credit, they also benefited from Alberta's job creation tax cut. We've been making those companies more competitive, helping them to improve their balance sheet, and are prepared to accept that offset on their royalty payments through additional CCUS capital expenditures. In addition to our ongoing tier investments, that constitutes a pretty meaningful Alberta contribution to upscaling carbon capture.
Do you have a follow-up, Chris?
Yeah, it's a bit of a two-part question, just following up on that, Premier. Is Ottawa seeking the province to provide any kind of funding or incentives as part of what they're looking to roll out as a tax credit, or is this part of a response to industry requests? That's the first part of that question. The second one is, the budget mentions that Alberta is seeking up to, I think, a 75% tax credit from Ottawa. How far apart is what you're requesting from what Ottawa is prepared to offer?
Well, I have some awareness of what Ottawa may be offering, but they haven't made a final decision. I think so. I have to respect that. They still have to go through their final budgetary decision-making process, and we'll know what they're offering when they table the federal budget. I do want to acknowledge that they made the commitment in principle in last year's budget, and I believe Minister Friedland and her department have been working diligently and in good faith on this. I have not been asked, and I'm not aware of any request from the Government of Canada for Alberta to increase its already very significant contributions to CCUS. And we have had discussions with the industry. I have the Pathways Group. I meet with the CEOs several times a year. And I have not received a specific request from them, but our point has been we continue to make these tier investments in CCUS infrastructure. We provided all employers in Alberta with a very substantial tax relief through the job creation tax cut, and they would benefit. Their royalty payments to Alberta would decline significantly for if they make big carbon capture capital expenditures. So I think you combine all of that up, and it's already a very substantial Alberta fiscal commitment to this critical infrastructure to reduce our emissions.
Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you put through our next caller?
Tim Brook, CTV.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. This one also for the Premier. We know a lot of money and exports are tied up in Russia right now. I'm just curious to know, as other provinces make some moves, is Alberta doing anything to sever ties with that country?
Well, I'm not aware of any particular ties. We have very small, negligible trade with the Russian Federation. And in the nearly 3 years I've been Premier, I can't recall a single commercial transaction that's come to my attention, either from the public or the private sector. So we could look more closely at that. But I'm not aware of anything that we could do that would, as a province, economically impact Russia, apart from one thing. That's producing and exporting more ethically produced Alberta energy. The Russian military machine and Putin's policy of aggression is financed by him being the single largest producer and exporter of oil and gas on the face of the earth. And Europe has become increasingly dependent on that energy supply, as has China. And indeed the United States, importing last December 840,000 barrels of Russian crude, which, by the way, is exactly the amount that Alberta would like to ship the United States through Keystone XL. So the role that we can play as a province is, if we had a willing federal partner and a realistic U.S. energy security policy, we could completely displace U.S. Russian oil imports, and if we got LNG export done off the East Coast, we could completely displace Russian gas exports to Europe. We could also play a meaningful role in displacing Russian energy exports to Asia off the West Coast if Justin Trudeau hadn't vetoed Northern Gateway and if protesters weren't constantly holding up LNG Canada and Coastal GasLink. So, again, there's nothing that I'm aware of in terms of investment or trade between Alberta and the Russian Federation of scale. I have called on the federal government to use the strongest possible sanctions, the most painful sanctions possible, to impose on Russian exports. I think we need to see the entire democratic world take a hard no to future Russian energy imports. That's what would hurt Vladimir Putin where it counts. That's how he gets foreign currency. That's how he fills up his treasury. That's how he finances his military machine. And Alberta, in the mid to long term, and I know people will say, well, this won't solve the problem that's happening in Ukraine today, but we also have to play the long game, just like Vladimir Putin has. His invasion of Ukraine didn't start this week. It started 8 years ago with his invasion of Crimea and his help for separatists in the Donbass. So he has been pursuing this invasion for 8 years. He plays the long game. It's time for the Democratic West to do the same, and pipelines shipping Alberta oil and gas is the single most powerful thing that Canada could do to end this reckless aggression of Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Premier. Tim, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just expanding on that. So, beyond lobbying for these federal changes as far as oil and gas, the Alberta government won't be making any import or export changes or, policy announcements to really, I guess, try to affect Russia.
Well, we could take a look at that, but I'm not aware of anything that we have as a government that related to Russian financial transactions. And really, in addition to blocking their energy exports, what needs to be done is to make it impossible for Putin's henchmen, these billionaire plutocrats, to operate around the democratic world. Their bank accounts should be frozen, their assets should be seized, they should be made persona non grata, and that's critically important. But also, Russian banks and financial transactions should be kicked out of the global credit system and the global payment system. If the democratic world is serious about stopping this aggression, then stopping Russian energy exports, making life unlivable outside of Russia for those individuals, but also seriously disrupting the entire global transaction of Russian financial services, I think those are the three most powerful things that could be done, and none of those are within the jurisdiction of a provincial government.
Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Andrew Brown, CBC.
Yeah, this is another one for the Premier. I've got a question about lowering the tax rate on smokeless tobacco. I get that this aligns with things like chewing tobacco with the per cigarette tax rate, but we know these products cause cancer, so why make them more affordable?
That's a detail I'd have to pursue with Minister Tays. I think we had a task force on the issue of smokeless tobacco products and ensuring, bringing in for the first time ever, a regulatory regime, because it was the Wild West until recently. There was no regulation in Alberta on that. So we have brought in regulation, and when you're doing that on anything like taxation of tobacco products, this is true also of cannabis, you need a price point that doesn't create a black market. So I believe that's what's behind that decision. I don't know, Jason, do you have any further insight into that? We'll have to get back to you. I'm afraid I wasn't prepared for that one.
Andrew, do you have a follow-up?
Thanks. No, that's great.
Thank you.
Operator, can you please put through our next caller?
Thank you. Shailen Skolsky, CTV.
Thank you for taking my question. My question is also for the Premier. Premier, it pertains to yesterday's budget and specifically the allocation of upwards of $70 million over 3 years for the expansion and operation of charter schools. Of course, this also follows that similar promise in the throne speech about a commitment to build new charter schools. I'm just wondering, why is the creation of these new charter schools so important for the government?
Because Albertans believe in and benefit from school choice. Because we believe that parents, not politicians, know what's in the best interests of their kids. And we believe in diversity and choice in education. Charter schools are a fantastic example of that. We have parents and families who are deeply involved in their kids' education, who set up these schools with specialized programming. The charter schools, let's be clear, they are public schools. They're charter public schools. They're fully funded publicly. They cannot charge tuition. They can't turn students away. They're fully accessible, but there's not enough of them. The demand far exceeds the supply. There's a wait list of about 15,000 kids waiting for a spot in a charter school, and they assign those spots on a first-come, first-served basis. So Alberta had this great innovation back in the mid-1990s with the charters. Unfortunately, there has been, until our government took office, there were no new charters established in Alberta for over a decade. We really want to see a renewal in that high-quality option for parents offered by public charter schools. But they have not been on an equal footing with the regular public or separate schools in terms of funding. We've been putting, we give capital funding to the school boards to build new schools in the public and separate systems. But we don't give capital funding, typically in the past, to the charter schools. They've had to kind of scour to pick up surplus schools that are no longer being used, many of which were built 60 and 70 years ago, are in bad repair, and they don't get capital maintenance. Until now, they haven't had capital maintenance and repair budgets. They haven't had adequate funding for special needs kids, even though they're required to accept kids with special needs. There's no funding to accommodate startup costs that are involved. If you go and talk to any of the public charter boards, you're going to find boards made up completely of volunteer parents who are deeply passionate about their kids' education. And we are not giving them adequate tools to achieve the full potential of the charter public schools, the public charter schools. So that's why we will be expanding this funding both on the capital and operating side, so that they are closer to being on an equal footing with the public and separate boards.
Thanks, Premier. Shailene, do you have a follow-up?
I do, yes. Speaking with the chair of the Edmonton Public School Board today, she called that funding for charter schools unfortunate in this budget and says it will lead to an erosion of the public education system. I guess, what do you say to that? And why isn't the public system, which is, my understanding, growing at the fastest rate in the province, seeing more support in this budget?
Well, public charter schools are part of the public system. They are publicly funded. They're not privately funded. They're accessible to everyone, and there's more demand than there is supply. So I would say to the big boards that Albertans believe in choice, diversity, pluralism. They believe that parents know best what kind of school their kids should go to. And I don't agree with the special interest groups who say that we should have just one monopoly on publicly funded education, one cookie-cutter approach to education. Kids are diverse. They have diverse needs. And charter schools are part of our diverse offering of educational programs. They've done extremely well in Alberta in terms of their educational outcomes. They're very popular with parents, and that's why there's more families in the queue waiting to get their kids into a charter school. We want to honor their choice, and that's why we're making this investment.
Thank you, Premier. Operator, can you please put through our final caller?
Thank you. Audrey Neveau, Radio Canada.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. It's for the Premier. If you could answer in English and French, that would be appreciated. What funds are there to staff those operating rooms and additional beds? I know you want to divert some surgeries to private charter facilities, but is there any money to staff the additional surgeries that will be done?
So part of the $600 million investment in the health budget yesterday will be to recruit, train, and hire additional staff, with an emphasis on staff in rural hospitals. But the $900 million invested in the Alberta Surgical Initiative in Budget 2021 is to provide public insurance for additional surgeries being performed in chartered surgical facilities. So those funds will pay for the staff salaries, pay for the surgeon's time and the nurses and support staff. But perhaps I'll try to say this in French, and then I might ask le docteur qui est ici, qui parle français, parce que évidemment peut répondre dans les deux langues. Are you willing to do that, François? Le docteur Bélanger. Alors, pour dire que, écoutez, hier, on a investi 600 millions de dollars nouveaux dans le système de santé pour, entre autres, engager, former le nouveau personnel dans le système entier. Et on a ajouté presque $1 milliard dans le budget précédent pour la stratégie de surgerie. Et ça comprend évidemment les fonds, les subventions pour les opérations, les surgeries, et y compris les personnels chirurgicaux et médicaux. Alors, docteur Bélanger?
Oui, merci pour la question. Le plan original en l'an 2019 prévoyait pour 80 000 chirurgies additionnelles au cours de 4 années. Évidemment, il faut réviser le plan, mais le plan prévoyait augmenter le nombre de chirurgies avec nos partenaires Chartered Surgical Facilities, de monter de 15 à 30 Alors, nous prévisons d'avoir environ 90 000 chirurgies qui sont faites à travers le système public. Les fonds viennent du système public, mais sont délivrés par les Chartered Surgical Facilities. Et puis, cette année, nous prévoyons faire au-dessus de 55 000 chirurgies dans cet environnement. Il faut réaliser que nous avons déjà 37 nous avons des contrats avec 37 Chartered Surgical Facilities. Alors, c'est déjà ça fait partie du système pour augmenter le nombre de chirurgies et c'est fondé par le gouvernement pour, à travers, les dollars vont être incorporés à travers les contrats et c'est la façon dont nous allons procéder pour subventionner. Merci.
Audrey, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, but on a different topic in French. Merci beaucoup, M. Bélanger, je l'apprécie. Pour M. Kenney, de nouveau, un sujet complètement différent sur l'éducation postsecondaire en français. Est-ce qu'avec le budget d'hier, votre gouvernement a accepté une offre du gouvernement fédéral pour offrir du financement additionnel au campus Saint-Jean?
Audrey, je n'ai pas entendu de cet renseignement. Mais j'ai eu les discussions avec le ministre fédéral pour le ministre fédéral à Edmonton qui m'a indiqué que le fédéral approche. I'm going to try that all over again. I'm sorry, Audrey. I've been thinking about healthcare in French too much. I apologize. Écoutez, je n'ai pas reçu ce renseignement, mais j'ai entendu que le fédéral est proche à une décision à subventionner les fonds supplémentaires pour le campus Saint-Jean. Et nous sommes prêts, comme un gouvernement provincial, d'avoir un partenariat avec le fédéral à cet égard. Alors, je suis toujours ouverte pour parler avec le fédéral. Je comprends très bien l'importance du campus Saint-Jean à la francophonie en Alberta et à l'éducation francophone postsecondaire et les décisions des subventions dans le cadre de l'Université de l'Alberta, c'est une décision de l'administration là-bas, mais reconnaissant l'importance de la francophonie, je comprends bien la décision du fédéral peut-être de les aider et nous sommes ouverts d'être les partenaires à cet égard.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.